Hello, welcome to Red Book Joy. Today I'm going to do a completely self-indulgent video all about the books I have on David Bowie. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack. If you're not new, welcome back to my channel. Like I said, today's a bit self-indulgent. It came about for a number of reasons. One is that I mentioned in a video a while back that I have a few books on David Bowie, and a few people requested to see them because I said if you want to see them, I'll do a video on them. So here it is. The other reason is I was recently tagged in the Your Answer Can't Be Books tag, which is a tag all about finding out about booktubers' other interests besides books. So one of the questions is, but what do you have a lot of that I suppose most people wouldn't have a lot of? That is not books. And my answer, I've got a few things, but one of them is David Bowie memorabilia and things. I probably haven't got as much as someone who's really obsessive. Sometimes I do say I'm a Bowie obsessive. I'm not really. I'm not like a Bowie file, one of those people who knows everything about every track and everything he ever did. But I am a fan, and I have been most of my life. So here is a bit of a self-indulgent video. A lot of these books, some of them I bought for myself, some of them were bought for me as presents, much like a lot of the memorabilia that I have. Today, I'm just going to go through the books because Your Answer Can't Be Books tag is, I couldn't really talk about the books. So my history with David Bowie before I start showing you the books is that I grew up in a house where I had two older brothers, quite a bit older than me. There's sort of 9 and 11 years older than me, and my oldest brother, growing up, I was a child in the 80s, and he was a Bowie fan from the 70s, so he had loads of Bowie albums, and he was a big fan of him. Grew up in a house like listening to his music, always loved it, and you know, growing up, I didn't even think of myself as a Bowie fan. He just was there, part of my life. His music was always part of my life. And then as I got older, and you stop listening to newer music as the older you get. I don't know if anyone else who got into their 40s has noticed this. I don't tend to buy a lot of new music or listen to a lot of new music. I stopped listening to the radio when I started listening to audiobooks too. So I noticed that the person I keep returning to year after year after year, always listening to, always have an album for a mood, was Bowie. And so I started getting deeper into his music, started reading a bit more about him. It's probably about 10-15 years ago, and I started becoming like a bit more obsessive about it. And then realising actually, out of all the musicians and all the music I've loved for my entire life, he's always been a favourite of mine, and actually probably my favourite artist in terms of the range of work that he has. And like I said, there's always an album for every kind of mood. So yeah, when he passed away in 2016, I was really devastated. I've never felt actual grief over a celebrity's death before. I've felt like sad and really upset over certain celebrities dying, and you know, feels real shame, especially favourites. But when Bowie died, I actually felt real kind of grief feeling, and it took me a long time. I couldn't listen to his music for quite a few months, and I'd pre-ordered Black Star, which was his album that he released a couple of days before he died on his birthday. And I remember celebrating it and posting on Facebook, oh my gosh, it's David Bowie's birthday and he's released a new album and this is amazing and maybe he's going to go on tour. Little knowing that the man had been terminally ill for some time. And this, yeah, when I found out that he died on Facebook, I followed David Bowie's official Facebook, and it was announced on there first. And I woke up in the morning and it had been announced on there. And I thought they've been hacked, because I went immediately to Google, checked Google, nothing about David Bowie dying. So I said to my partner, oh my God, I think they've been hacked, because they're saying I didn't realise that's where they would announce it. And then basically, yeah, I went to have my shower. I'm like, oh, that's fine, it's not true. And then my partner came down and said, oh, actually, it is true. It's suddenly all over the news. And then you just couldn't escape it. And for a whole week, it was like the whole world went into mourning for David Bowie, who's a very unique individual. And yeah, so yeah, I'm going to share my books about him and maybe share a few little stories about how I got the books or whatever. But some of them are really silly little gift books. Some of them are more serious reference books. So let's get into it. First thing is something that is a little silly book that someone gave me, Pocket Bowie Wisdom. I'm going to share all the books that I have just so that you know. But yeah, Pocket Bowie Wisdom, inspirational words from a rock legend. And I was given this as a little birthday present or a little stocking filler, I think. But yeah, lots of nice Bowie quotes in here. I'm just going to open up because he had lots of words of wisdom and read one or two for you. Oh, so in Jackie magazine, that's interesting, isn't it? Jackie, could be me. Jackie magazine's like a magazine here in the UK for teenage girls. Back in the 70s and 80s. People are much more important to me than ideas. Quite right, Mr. Bowie. This one's good. I've come to the realisation that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing half the time. That's all of us, isn't it? I certainly don't understand half the stuff I write. I can look back on a song I've just written and it means something different, entirely different now because of my new circumstances. Interesting. That kind of puts paid to the theory about what did he mean and what does it all mean and what do his lyrics mean, because half the time I don't think he even knew what they meant. And I quite like the fact that unlike modern musicians, some modern musicians, there's a mystery about him, an air of mystery, and he liked to keep himself at distance from the media and from any interpretation of his work, that he just didn't offer anything about his work. So it's all there for people to just mull over and pick over. And I like that about him, air of mystery. Next up, I'm going to go through the biographies that I have. And some of them are, one of the children's book, which of course, because you know, my bag is children's books. If you've been here for a while, you'll know that. And it's The Little People, Big Dreams, David Bowie. This is such a great series. I think everyone's seen this by now. They're a wonderful series of biographies for children all around famous people from history, famous living, celebrities, artists, sports people, politicians, civil rights movement leaders, and all sorts of people. And they've got one on David Bowie. How cute is this? So I'll just show you a few of the pages inside. So it's all about his life, and that's David Bowie living in his family's house, in a tiny house in a street in London. So that's when he was living in Brixton, and I think they've got a UFO book. That's tiny David Bowie. And at that time his eyes are the same colour, do you see? Because he had one colour eye different because he was punched in the eye by one of his friends in school, and it basically gave him a permanently dilated pupil. So it looks like his eyes are a different colour, but it's just where the pupil's permanently dilated. And he loved to sing and dance, and there he was at school, and there he is going to his art teacher, and that's him with his saxophone in the Conrads. He kind of reinvented himself quite a lot, of course, that's what he's famous for. But yeah, I love this. Look at this book. So wonderful. Look, there he is. Never being afraid to be himself, little David became the most unique star who ever fell to earth. Love this. Another brilliant book that the same brother, also got me, my younger brother, is Bowie, Stardust, Ray Guns and Moon Age Daydreams, which is a graphic novel all around that period of the early 70s to the late 60s to the early to mid 70s, where he shot to stardom. It's about his rise to stardom and his alter ego Ziggy Stardust, and then the death of Ziggy Stardust. So it's a fantastic book. I'll show you I might do some top-down filming of it and just flick through it, so while I'm talking to you now you can just have a little look at some of the brilliant artwork in it. But it is by Steve Horton, Michael Allred and Laura Allred. Michael Allred is the artist, Laura Allred is the colourist, and Steve Horton is the writer. Yeah, I highly recommend this for any Bowie fan. It's a beautiful book, beautiful. Next up are two biographies I have on my Kindle, and one of them is Starman, and it's there aren't any official David Bowie biographies, and if you're not aware, there's no official sort of story of his life, so everything is kind of unofficial. And these two, I don't know if these are the best biographies of Bowie out there, and I can't really remember much about them, to be honest with you, but one is called Starman, and it's straightforward biography of his life. I think it doesn't go up to his death, because I bought this before he died. And the other one is a book called The Biography Bowie, and it's by Wendy Lee. And if I remember correctly, this one's a bit gossipy, I think. So yeah, not really the best. Next up is a book that is actually quite a well-respected book about David Bowie. If you're looking for something that is well thought of and highly regarded, it's The Age of Bowie by Paul Morley, and it was published after he died. Paul Morley is apparently an arts commentator. I don't really know much about Paul Morley, but I do know that he curated the David Bowie Is exhibition, which is still touring the world at the moment. I don't know what's happened with it in the time of COVID, but it started in London, and I think 2012 or 2013 David Bowie opened up his personal archive of everything: his costumes, his song lyrics, his instruments, his memorabilia, all the things that he kept from his career right back to his teenage years. He's kept this archive, and Paul Morley was one of the curators of it at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, so he knows an awful lot about David Bowie. I went to see the exhibition and I've got a book from it which I'll show you as well. But this is not a straightforward life of David Bowie. It's actually more of a commentary on David Bowie's legacy and his impact and his place in the world and society and culture at different stages of his career. So it's a really interesting read. It's not, like I said, a straightforward biography, and it's blended. It's kind of a memoir of Morley's memories of himself as a fan of David Bowie at different stages of Bowie's career as well. I think it's a really interesting read. I think if you are a David Bowie fan, it's a must read, and I really enjoyed it. But I like the fact that this book kind of gives you a cultural context for Bowie and his rise to stardom, and how, I mean, it took a long time. If you're not a fan of David Bowie, you may not know, but he was trying for 10 years to have a successful single album, and he was in many bands before he basically became Ziggy Stardust and shot to stardom in that year. And the year he released The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, he had released Hunky Dory and The Man Who Sold the World quite close together as well. So it's three of his most iconic albums, and this gives you, it talks about what David Bowie was doing at those stages, and Paul Morley does this kind of imaginative running commentary in between about what David Bowie was doing at that time, like physically doing and learning and growing. So yeah, it's a really interesting book. Next up is a TBR book for me, and apparently this is the definitive book to read on David Bowie. It's as close to an official Bowie biography as you're going to get, because it is completely comprised of interviews with people who knew him. It's set at different stages of his life, so it goes by, like, it's sorted into sections that are decades or years, groups of years, and people that spoke about him who knew him at that time. Some of them are interviews from people from the past, but some are brand new interviews. It's basically an oral history of David Bowie as told by people who knew him and who were around. And so yeah, this is probably as close to an official biography as you can get. It's apparently brilliant, and I have yet to read it, and when I do, I'm sure I'll do a review of it. Next up are some reference books on David Bowie. So if you want to find out more about his life, his work and everything like that, then these books are pretty good, but the best one is this. This is the Complete David Bowie, and it's by Nicholas Pegg, and it is the book to have if you are a David Bowie fan and you want to find out about his entire body of work. I mean, just look at the size of this book. So he was prolific. In here you've got all of his singles, his albums, his live sessions, every concert he ever did, every recorded the BBC sessions that he did. You've got all of his stage performances, his screen performances, his TV performances. I don't even know if you've got the interviews and things like that in here. I bought it mainly because I wanted to read about the albums and the tracks and listings whilst I listened to his albums yet again. I decided last year during lockdown I would listen to his entire back catalogue again, and that whilst I did that, whilst I listened to all the albums, I would actually just read up on them. And so this is a brilliant resource. It's not the sort of thing that you sit down, it's definitely, you know, it's an encyclopedia basically. You do not sit down and read this cover to cover, but it's a brilliant reference book. If you're completely geeky about Bowie, I think you definitely need to have this one. Last two books, I'm going to show you a top-down video of whilst I talk to you, because they're just beautiful books. The first book is the official companion to the David Bowie Is exhibition, which was at the Victoria and Albert Museum and then went on a world tour. I was always hoping it would come back to London because I did go to the exhibit, but it reminded me, it was sold out, the exhibition here in London, and there were queues. They had tickets that you could buy on the day, but you had to queue for them. But I bought tickets in advance for it, and I went with a friend of mine. And when we went to it, it reminded me of, the only other thing it reminded me of was when I went to see the Sistine Chapel. And I'm not comparing this exhibition to seeing the Sistine Chapel, but the crowds and the way that you had to move through the exhibit because there were so many people there wanting to see it. You almost shuffled through and didn't get enough time, I felt, to explore and read and look at every item that was in the exhibit in the way that I would have wanted to. So I did buy the companion book because it's just stunning. It's a really beautiful book. It lists everything that was in the exhibition and the stories behind it. You've got sort of a lot of reading in this book as well. I haven't read all of it, of course, but I have looked through it. I have stopped and read certain parts that I didn't get enough time to see at the exhibition, and it's just a stunning book. I never got to see David Bowie perform live, and it's one of the big regrets of my life that I didn't do that. But the other book I've got was a gift from one of my other brothers. So this was from my next older brother, and it is David Bowie, The Golden Years by Roger Griffin. This is a stunning book. The edges are all gold as well, so it's absolutely beautiful, and I'm going to do another top-down flick through of this while I talk to you about it. But this book is really interesting because it chronicles what David Bowie was doing every single day from 1970 to 1980. So every single day that they have a record of what he was doing, you can open this up at any point and decide and discover what he was doing on Monday the 1st of May. I can't even remember what year this is, but it looks like from what he's wearing 1976 or 77, which I was born in 77. So yeah, he was socialising at the hotel bar after the show. Bowie caught up with Lindsay Kemp. Lindsay Kemp was one of his mentors when he was younger, who taught him mime, and apparently might have been one of his lovers, but who was playing a season of Salome and Flowers in Toronto and had been to the concert that night with Jack Burkett, aka the Incredible Orlando. And then the next night what he was doing, and then the next night. So you can open this up at any point and you can just basically follow what he was doing every single day for 10 years. And it's just a beautiful book, lovely pictures, amazing quality book. So those are all my David Bowie books. I don't think I'm an obsessive. A lot of them were built as presents for me, but they are things that I treasure, and I do love learning a bit more about him and his life. I think he's a fascinating person, and his death was a great loss to the world. If you are a Bowie fan and you have any memories you'd like to share about him, if you saw him in concert, if you were lucky enough to do that, if you have memories of his music growing up or any of those things, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you've got any Bowie books you would recommend to me, I'd also like to hear about that. So if the 10 of you who are probably watching this video, if you liked it, also please don't forget to click like. If you're not subscribed and you'd like to subscribe, do that too. And hopefully I will see you again here soon. Bye.